Rick, I am decked out in my power color today.
You know, I'm glad you started with that conversation because I was going to say something that I thought, yeah, people will think I'm criticizing you. You are more than decked out, brother. You are. Does batteries come with that? Damn, turn that thing down, will you?
So, you know what?
And the matching hat. The lid, he's got the lid to boot.
You know what? You say people will think you're criticizing me. You're right.
That's out of love.
See,
it's out of love.
this was an opportunity for you to practice no judgment.
Yeah, but I'm a comedian too, so you know, in the sense of the art, it's okay. Right?
Okay, right. Okay, man, it's so good to see you.
I love you, buddy.
How you doing,
See
man?
I'm doing great. How
Good.
about you?
Dude, it's like that? Man, the guts on this guy.
Oh, come on, this is the one. You're talking here.
I love it, man. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great.
Very cool.
I'm doing great.
Very cool. What do you want to talk about?
Why don't you take a shot at it?
All
What's
right.
the show?
Okay, so we were covering a bunch of little truisms when we were off camera, like little cliches about life. And one of the things we came up with, and I think it's worth doing a show on, is the idea that everything is connected to everything else. The idea is that we're not islands, that we're not isolated from one another, but that as human beings, we're all networked. And if we do something, it may show up in China, as far-fetched as that may seem, in 2 weeks from now. And so the concept is, if that's true, then how do we order our lives to live the best possible way for ourselves with integrity, and also live with integrity so that we don't harm other people and encourage them to be their best selves as well?
You know, I agree with that truism, and I think it's been true since the beginning of time, you know. I also think that it's even more true now in that the consequence of an action that you take is more immediate. So, for example, with technology, you know, you don't like someone, or you gotta, you know, you want to, you know, be angry with someone. You write a pretty, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Heated letter, strongly worded letter to them.
Yeah.
And now it's a tweet, it's an email, it's a text, you know, it's immediate.
Boom.
A letter takes a week to get there. You know? Before that, it was the Pony Express. Take days, weeks, months.
Might even get lost.
It might even get lost. But not in this day and age. So it's even more immediate, the impact we have on others, you know. So I think it requires us to be mindful of what we want is peace in our lives, and even, you know, and having peace in our lives, we allow that to radiate out and to bring peace to other people's lives.
That's right, and I think the law of attraction applies here as well. How you present becomes a reflection of what you receive back. So if you're acting out with anger, if you're always frustrated, if you're taking out your deficits that you complain about in your life to other people and expecting them to make a change, likely what's going to happen is you're not going to get solutions. You're going to hear back all those things from the other person because you've more or less given them permission to do the very thing that you're doing to them. I think connectivity, you know, along with having all of this instantaneous communication, the fact that we're all connected, you know, we can have a Facebook partner in Argentina and do some Facebooking right now, go off camera, and assuming that he or she is awake and given the time change, we can have a conversation with that person. Or if it's a bunch of people all over the world, we can have that instantaneous connectivity with all of them. So that creates two things. One is a great advantage for us in the sense that we have a wider range of acquaintances and a different kind of looking at life that comes from the benefit of seeing how other people live. But it also creates a responsibility in us not to do things that would harm, hurt, or in any way disparage other people. And that sensitivity, that diplomacy that is required in life, I think is lacking. And it's partly lacking because people don't realize their own power to hurt the feelings of other people needlessly.
Yeah, and I think it's become a lot easier to do that when you're not sitting, you know, side by side, someone looking in my eyes, pressing flesh, so to speak.
That's right.
I think it's a lot easier to do that because there's this layer between you and the other person, and even considering what they might be feeling or how they could take something a certain way. And when you're face to face, it makes it much more challenging to act out in a way that's less than your best.
That's right, and when you have that social media pressure, you're also not just using those harmful words to hurt somebody else. You're doing it in an audience, with an audience. You're doing it with all of your friends looking, and you're hoping that the reaction is going to be, boy, Rick really put Keith in his place, and you're hoping you're going to get strokes from all of the other folks.
Exactly.
Which is a very low level to be operating on.
Exactly. And what happens when you don't get the strokes? Or let's say the mob turns against you. Then you look at yourself like, oh my God, what did I do? It's only at that point do people start to rethink their position and how it may have been flawed. But we're saying before it even gets to that point, if you just continue to work on yourself every day, then the majority of what comes out of your mouth, the energy that you put out there, is loving and peaceful.
And that, again, is part of the law of attraction. Okay, think of yourself as a moment. Just a little allegory, see if this makes sense to you guys. But if you think of yourself as like just a pebble, and the universe picks up you, a pebble, and throws it in a very calm pond, and the pebble hits in the middle of the pond, what happens? Ripples go out. And everything that happens from that pebble's initial energy is interpreted in the way by the water that pushes these ripples out to every place on the pond. And I think that is a fairly good analogy for what happens when we act in a certain way, whether it's kind or whether it's vicious.
Right.
And I also think as a component of that, what you get back is that same kind of feeling. If you send out love, you get love. If you send out viciousness, you get viciousness.
You know, that reminds me of, we talk about the law of attraction, of something that, Wayne Dyer talks about. And, it's a peaceful world, it's a hostile world. It's the same world.
Same world.
It depends on what you're putting out and what you're seeing. So you ask yourself, beholding these, if I see the world as hostile, what am I putting out in the world? I don't see the world as hostile. I see some things that could be different. People could be more loving, but on the whole, I see it as a loving world. I'm surrounded by amazing, loving people. Even the people that aren't, that don't feel like they're loving to me, they are. Their higher conscious self is. If you're stuck in the ego, you can't be. But in all of us, woven through the fabric of every life on the planet is one consciousness. And that consciousness is loving, and it's in all of us. So even if you don't know you're loving me, you're loving me.
That's the matrix. Right?
And I'm loving you.
Well, what do you do? Let me play devil's advocate on that idea for just a moment. What do you do with a person who says, in ToBeRe, for example, one-on-one, quietly away from the rest of the group, Keith, I have serious problems. I have a husband who doesn't understand me, or a wife who's constantly ridiculing, or I have addiction problems, or my son is a slow learner and we can't afford to have him in a school that costs a lot of money. I don't have any money, I just got kicked out. In other words, everyone is going to have, let's say in my example, a story to tell you that would show that they're entitled to something that they're not getting, and that they have a right to act out. How do you apply that? What do you counsel them?
Well, what I would tell them is that, it's fiction and a myth that life is here to make you happy. Like, that's the first one. All of life is suffering. Right? One of the first noble truths, right? That you taught me.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when you get your mind around that, whatever your reality is, you accept it. But let's say that you still feel like you're entitled for it to be different, and life should be different for you. Let's say that's your mindset. I'm gonna say, if you want to, you can be right about that mindset, and if you choose to be, there's suffering that comes with it. So, I got nothing but compassion for you if that's the route that you're going to take. However, if you're able to acknowledge that this is my reality, and with this being my reality, how do I find peace while this is going on around me? That's a different conversation.
That's a different conversation.
And at that point is where what you have shared in previous podcasts about meditation is key. Who you surround yourself with. Do what you can do, but continue to practice self-care along the way is really, really key. I want to get back to what you said about attraction.
Okay.
And Eckhart Tolle told this story about attraction. This really speaks to me about, again, it's all tied into the consequences of your actions, your thoughts, what you tell yourself. All that's tied together in what you attract. So there's this town that this guy comes to, and he sits next to this other gentleman who's lived in town his whole life. So the guy sits down and he says to him, "Hey, listen, tell me about this town. I'm thinking about moving here. What are the people like here?" And he goes, "Well, tell me about the people. Tell me what the people are like where you coming from." He's like, "Well, they're bitter, they're backstabbing, they judge all the time, they never help anybody, they are rude, they are self-centered, they're hateful." He was like, "Well, the people here, they're kind of like that." The next day, another guy sits down and shows up.
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey man, I really love your town. I'm thinking about moving here. Tell me about the people here before I, make that choice." He's like, "Well, tell me about the people, what the people are like where you come from." "Well, they're nice, they're kind, they're compassionate, they're loving, they really care about other people, they're full of gratitude." He's like, "Well, the people here, they're kind of like that." So the moral of it is wherever you go, there you are. You bring that to the space, then that's what you're going to get back. You bring hostility to the space, and all you will see is hostility. So I'm not a social media person. Rick isn't either. We're not people that watch the news every day. So life is pretty peaceful for us.
We're having a great time.
Great time. But if you watch it all the time because you think you got to be informed, which is information that I wouldn't necessarily be trusting, but if that's your thing and that's your bag, knock yourself out. How many peaceful days and nights do you experience? That's the question I want to know.
Yeah,
Like, has it increased your capacity to be loving and to be grateful, to see the good in others? Or has it made you more cynical about the future, more pessimistic about people, distrustful? Same world.
It's the same world, that's right. Well, that's also true, I think, in just the general way that we process things as humans. There's something in psychology called the confirmation bias, which basically means that we have this cherry-picking ability to select things in life that we see that confirm our prejudices, our biases, and our beliefs. And so we tend to follow people who are like-minded. We tend to reaffirm people and believe in them when they're like-minded. And we tend to find all kinds of terrible things that are made up, a story you tell yourself, about people that we disagree with. Just like your example with whether you have great people or crappy people at the new town. It's what you've come from. It's what you expect it's going to control. And the only way you can get out of that, in a sense of freedom for yourself, is to remember that if you want to be loving, if you want to be compassionate, you have to be that. End of story.
Absolutely.
Pick out what the thing is that you want to be. Pick out the character, the nature of your character. And if you want to create a life for yourself, be it.
I totally agree.
Be it.
And other people, in terms of consequences or impact to others, it's going to be so much more loving, positive, and peaceful. I want to say one thing regarding consequences because I lived, how do I say this? I lived my life for a long time that I was the victim of someone's short-sightedness. Now, mind you, I practiced that behavior the majority of my life and have impacted other people, but don't bother me with those facts. My mind's already made up.
That's right. It was them, man, not me.
So when I was a kid, I had my aunt was upset with my mom, and this is at a time when I was 17 years old. I didn't have a place to stay. I was going from place to place, living out of my car. I grew up in an abusive household. And again, I've said in other podcasts, my stepfather really struggled with alcoholism. I mean, now I got nothing but love and peace for him, but back then there was a lot of misplaced anger, made up stories about the whole situation, none of which were true, but it led to a lot of suffering. One of my aunts took me in, and I did everything that I possibly could to not have an adverse impact on their living situation. Cleaning up around the house, doing many chores without being asked, coming in very, very late at night so not to disrupt their TV time or what they were watching on television. Just a really light footprint because I didn't want to have my aunt say to me, "Keith, you need to go because you are not contributing in some positive way to our household." So I thought I'd done everything I could, and I chose to, my aunt called my mom one day and said, "Hey, listen, Keith needs to pack his things and go." And I was like,
Wow.
wow, like I can't believe it. So I begged and begged and begged. My aunt and my mom is on the phone telling me, "Keith, just pack your things. We'll try to figure something out tomorrow." And so I went to go ask my aunt, this can't be true. You've said so many times that I'm one of your favorite, nephews. There's no way this could be true. And I kept trying to get her to say that it wasn't true, that there was a misunderstanding, and I was fully welcome in her home. But that never happened. I was told to leave, and what was really going on, I took it personally, which was again misplaced. But what I learned as I grew years later, that my aunt was trying to teach my mom a lesson, that she should have been more responsible for us, myself and my brother, and we shouldn't have been in this situation. My mom was just coming out of an abusive, relationship, marriage of over, 13 years. Like, she needed a safe place to land. Like, I never judged my mom once, And so, but my aunt was not making it personal toward me. She was trying to teach my aunt, my aunt was not trying to make it personal toward me. She was trying to teach my mom a lesson. And caught up in that crossfire, the unexpected consequences was me. Mm-hmm. And my aunt is not, I don't have any blame toward her anymore. So I don't have any blame toward her anymore, but I took that event and I allowed it to color how I see people, that I can't trust anyone for the next 30 years almost, that I looked at that situation. And so now the whole time, I didn't really get and understand that until probably about 5 years ago. But I really took it deeply and allowed it to marinate within me about 3 years ago, to where I'm really trying to be a lot more responsible with my actions and the consequences that my actions may have on someone else.
Well, that's a perfect example of the interconnectedness of all people, and the idea that everything is connected to everything else, because here's your aunt thinking that she's teaching your mom a lesson, and the consequence really weighed heavily on you and affected your life in a negative way for years. Now, in addition...
And every friend and relationship that I... Go ahead.
That's right, that's what I was going to say. And it's not only... It didn't end with you. It was played out again and again and again and again, that mistrust with all of the other people you met, and displayed that mistrust too. And then they in turn may have played it out, and they in turn may have played... And so the point is, it doesn't stop with just you and one interaction. And in the case of your aunt, it wasn't even intended to hit you.
No.
Think of how powerful it would have been if it was intended toward you. I mean, that's happening all the time. So the idea is that your behavior has enormous consequences. And it's not only consequences for others, but also for ourselves. I'm sure your aunt, after this all happened, realized that there was collateral damage, you.
When I called my aunt 10 years ago to apologize for withholding love and connection and blaming her for all those years, she tried to explain and tried to tell me, and I just told her, it wasn't necessary. Because an apology wasn't necessary, that I got it. But the healing really took place over a long period of time, probably the next 7 or 8 years, in which I finally got it. But here's the thing. I can't control my aunt. I can't control anyone else in my life with the actions that the things they may do. I can't control any of that. So what I can do is, no matter what another person does, not take it personally. There are no external enemies. It's all ego created. Once I get that, I become powerful, and no matter how anyone shows up, regardless of how they behave, I'm practicing loving kindness. Again, easier said than done,
Yeah.
but if I beat on this craft every single day in my daily rituals, I stand a better chance of being successful.
It's so true, Keith, and it's so difficult. And we have not mastered it, don't get that. We're just pointing it out. We're people who have suffered, and we're people who have figured out why we're suffering, and we're trying to stop it. But we still suffer because we still do this stuff. And so what we're trying to get across is, try it out for yourself and see what the results are. If you put it in a nutshell, for me it would be, You know, circumstances are gonna come out of nowhere, crap that you never considered is gonna hit you tomorrow morning. Things you didn't plan on are gonna go south. Things that you did plan are gonna foul up. That's life, man. But you can always control your reaction to it. You can always control your reaction. You can't control the externals at all, but your reaction, that's your business.
Absolutely. Rick, thank you for a great show.
I love you, Keith.
I love you too. Thank you.